there, true believers. It is August 3rd, 2026. It is 4:29 p.m. It is 79 degrees, sort of sunny, and it's a Monday. I don't know what to say or what to do with sort of like the advice I can have with this Monday, but Mondays will always pass. I think I really got like the David Lynch impersonation pretty well. So I'm going to be making like a retrospective video for Mulholland Drive, which is one of those films where I don't really know how to explain the sort of like momentum and vibe of this film. This film came out in 2001. It's coming towards its 25th anniversary, and I think it's probably one of the best films of like the 21st century, like hands down. The reason why I'm making this retrospective video is because Pop Topic is currently having a 2001 retrospective of films that have come out around that time, and I decided to choose Mulholland Drive as the film to talk about for my favorite films of 2001. And from the get-go, I think this film is extremely fascinating and one of those films where there's no right or wrong in terms of dissecting this film. David Lynch is one of those directors who is unafraid of showing the dark depths of grief, regret, love, and the whole idea of like dream logic in cinema and in humanity. I think with this video, I kind of want to like express myself as far as showing what this film has done to change my life as an artist, but also I want to like celebrate David Lynch's career because he's probably one of the greatest directors of the 21st century, and there is a reason why he has been kind of been beloved in the cinephile space. So yeah, let's kind of like dive into this because I'm really excited to like talk about this film in depth. And if you haven't seen the film, please do, and then come back and we'll kind of like discuss a little bit like about the themes and whatnot. But really the whole point is that there's no right or wrong with dissecting this film. David Lynch is that person who will tell you straight up that he does not want to talk deeply about his films. He wants to let the audience have its cake and eat it.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Mm-hmm. We'll elaborate on that.
No, I won't. No one sees it.
But yeah, let's kind of like dive into this. David Lynch holds a special place in my heart as a filmmaker and artist. Lynch's ability to deconstruct the true horrors of humanity through dreams is something that should be held to the highest standard. Throughout his entire career leading up to Mulholland Drive, Lynch has become kind of like the most calmest director inside and outside of his filmography, nature speaking, but then yet again his films are extremely dark. But even before Mulholland Drive, he did a film called The Straight Story, which subverted a lot of like audiences' expectations by avoiding a lot of like the established surrealist undertones and sad stuff that happens in his films, and is favorable for a family-friendly audience and carried a lot of great messaging about grief. But I think after Straight Story, Lynch was trying to find a way to return to television, and his series Twin Peaks was canceled after revealing who Laura Palmer is and who the killer was. Lynch wasn't fully involved with like the second season of that show, so he was understandably kind of like defeated by the idea of returning to a medium that had disrespected his own stylistic choices as an artist. So we kind of have to like talk about how Mulholland Drive started out as a television series concept, and it started out with ABC, giving the money to Lynch and letting him have like these abilities to make the show, but time constraints, budget concerns led up to eventually just Lynch basically drafting this film into a feature film from like a plot television series. So with Mulholland Drive now being from a TV show to a movie, you can kind of see where the film is kind of like leading into in terms of that. But I think also at the same time, Lynch is entirely unafraid of showing pretty much the dark sides of humanity through the eyes of like the dream logic themes that Lynch always does with a lot of his films. And dream logic as this thing, we experience in our lives when we dream is universal, but also in a way inexplainable. I think with Mulholland Drive, this is probably like the film that really speaks deeper into the notion of dream logic and what it can tell as far as showing the dark sides of celebrity life. Naomi Watts is an actress who was struggling around this time before Mulholland Drive. She wasn't in a lot of like big movies. And Lynch has a really good eye for his actors. He's one of those like directors who can really pull a super famous actor or somebody who's very like downscaled in their career and make them into a character. And Naomi Watts deserved to be in the spotlight. This film really showed her craft, her ability to emote as a struggling artist who is trying to become something. And just like the whole duality between the two characters that she's playing, Betty and Diane, really kind of like brought me into the world in which Lynch is trying to portray. Lynch, in his own twisted kind of like sense of mind, is one of those people who is very attentive to dream logic, but also is in love with like 50s to like early 40s and 30s iconography. And this film opens in a way where it's just throwing stuff at you, like the Jitterbug opening with like the people dancing to like the Jitterbug. It's supposed to be very unnerving and insane, and it's supposed to kind of like put you on the spot in your mind, because that's how dreams are supposed to feel. Dreams are supposed to feel very chaotic, and some of it doesn't make sense, but eventually you find some sort of like ground with like your dreams that you're pulling inside of your naps or your sleeps. And from the beginning of this film, you're thrown into a perspective where Betty, or Diane, is coming out of the airport with her family members and is trying to reach out to Hollywood and become like a successful actress in a land where it's full of despair and darkness and evil. And the weird kind of like perspective and understanding of just like the dialogue in the first few scenes of this film is quite unintentionally funny, but like also at the same time there's sort of like a point, because Lynch is using a lot of like overdubbing of like the dialogue and like the weird kind of like campy undertones with some of the characters that appear on screen. And the film basically opens with a box opening and zooming into sort of like a dark hole of depressing thoughts coming from Naomi Watts' characters. And once you kind of like get into like the feeling of those two characters trying to reach out to their dreams, then the film starts to kind of like close in on another character, Camilla, played by Laura Haring, who is also an actress, and is also another character, Rita, who is kind of going through the same plight as Naomi Watts' characters. But she is at a point where she's trying to become even more of a person that is more attainable in the Hollywood land. And both of these characters are madly in love with each other, and this is where like the queer subtext kind of like comes into play, because once they start to really fall in love with each other, then it turns into something that is very sort of demonic in a way. And it's mostly coming from one of the characters starting to really feel the jealousy between their career paths. And one of the characters eventually hires a hitman to kill this person and becomes regretful of the decision that that person did to that person. and has to live with that decision upon the ending of the film, where the box that was open in the early scene of this film is closed, and the dream starts to drift off into a nightmare. And it's a nightmare that will never end internally inside of Watts' character and outside of the other character that is actually the real character in this story. And I think Lynch is really telling himself as an artist with this film as far as artistic integrity, what you can do with a film, what he has gone through in his entire career up to Mulholland Drive. And in the article that I wrote for this movie, I mentioned Sunset Boulevard as like kind of like the apt comparison for this film, because it is about the jadedness of Hollywood dreams and like the transition between the silent era to the talkie era, and that transition to that kind of like technology is sort of kind of reflective of what Mulholland Drive is in the film, like the actual movie, because you have a director played by Justin Theroux, Adam Kesher, who is forced to hire Camilla or Rita, if you're kind of like trying to figure out what character is in the dream and out of the dream. But he's hired to cast this person by the mob. He's trying to really figure out what to do with this film, even though the mob is kind of like a stand-in for the Hollywood system, and how Hollywood is only there to cast people who look sort of like the way that they want to like perceive, you know, hot, sexy, whatever. The film's intentional incoherence regarding to the paths these characters take somehow sort of like intersects with like Betty's inability to break out in Hollywood, which is Naomi Watts' character. And of course, like I mentioned before, it's implied that Betty hired a hitman to kill Rita out of jealousy. And this is the moment in the film where it does start to kind of like deviate away from the actual like story, the meat, and it turns into like a really nightmare scenario. And also at the same time, Billy Ray Cyrus just appears in this film, and it turns into like a really dark episode of Hannah Montana, if we really have to like think about that.
Now you've done it.
Just forget you ever saw it. It's better that way.
But once that happens, I think this is where the film starts to really hone in on like the nightmarish affair with dealing with Hollywood elites and the dreams of being a big actor. And just going back to like David Lynch's kind of thing where he really wants to show what he wants to tell with his stories. I think the Justin Theroux character is David Lynch in some way. He has struggled through a lot of like the production issues with this film and like other films like The Elephant Man. Even his final film, Inland Empire, had a lot of trouble production-wise and just promoting the film in general. But I think him making this film is sort of like his goodbye to his sensibilities in a way, but like he does go deeper into it with Inland Empire, but it's just a way where he's trying to express himself. And I think once you finally figure out that this film doesn't explain itself, then you kind of like know, okay, then this is not the film that's going to spell it out for me. I'm just going to go for the vibe and for the ride. And that was mostly me seeing this film the first time when I saw it. I didn't know what to expect or what to do with this film before and after watching the film. I kind of had to like sit with it. And I think that's the entire point of David Lynch's entire filmography, aside from The Straight Story, which the title explains itself. It's a straight story. But I think just like going back to just understanding this film, there's no clear answer to like what this film actually is about, the structure, the characters, and I think the hitman element is the major key to all of this. And the box, because the box opening and then slowly crashing back out of the frame near the end of this film really kind of like shows that, okay, the dream is over and now these characters are going through a nightmare, and a woman is in trouble, and a woman will be in trouble again in Inland Empire. But I think what I really want to say about this film is just, first off, what a picture. This is easily one of like the best films of the last century, and it really shows why it is, because it's a labyrinth. It's a film where you can take any kind of perspective with it, and it could be, you know, the right answer and it could be the wrong answer, but it just doesn't matter, because Mulholland Drive it's an experience. And I'm just really happy that like I saw this at like a ripe age of like the early 20s, and I was able to kind of like take it firsthand and then kind of like read it into like the interpretations from like other people, and then eventually kind of like watch it again and again and again, and start to really understand what Lynch is trying to pull with like the dream logic, thematic, aesthetic. Because really, I think David Lynch is like a master at like dream logic. He understands what dreams are and what nightmares are, and he just understands that. I will also say that I think this film does stand the test of time as far as what the medium can do, because I think this is one of those films where when I watched it for the first time, I was just like, wow, you can actually make a film like this. You can actually like go out of the box, out of the way. Like, you don't really have to do like the generic 3-act structure. You can, you know, go around it. You can contort it. You can do things with it. Or you can just like completely discard the idea of like the 3-act structure. This doesn't really have like a 3-act structure. It's just there. And like the first scene, the jitterbug scene, it's immediately like throwing you into this like nightmare that will never end. I will also say that like going like deeper into like the idea of like the romance of the film, I think this really perfectly kind of like shows itself of like what like jealousy is in like a relationship, especially when you're friends with someone who is doing better than you per se. And I think Naomi Watts' characters are two characters who, on the one hand, are really trying to be successful in their career, but also at the same time they see another person that they love that is doing better than them, and then the jealousy just kind of like seeps into their psyche, and they want to do things that are very disgusting and violent to this person, but they can't do it because that would cause damage to their entire human life. And I think David Lynch kind of like pulling like the duality between the two characters that Naomi Watts plays. It's almost sort of like a way where one character is just like, okay, like in the real world, like I'm not going to kill this person, obviously. I'm just going to become jealous and become more jealous and kind of like live with that for the rest of my life. But then the other character actually does it, and that kind of like destroys the sanctity of like what a human can be, if that makes sense. And it doesn't make sense, because this movie is on purpose a film that doesn't have to make sense, especially when it gets to one of the scariest scenes in the film, where one of the characters, a character who is a minor character in this film, is at a diner talking to another character about dreams and like how dreams kind of like slowly creep up into your periphery, and you don't know what to make out of it, but like it spooks you out. And then the character just walks out and immediately gets like jump scared by a homeless person. And it's one of the scariest like jump scares that you'll ever see in your entire life. Just like the way it really like fucks with your mind. Like it's just, oh my god. And like David Lynch, again, like he really knows what to do with like that like aesthetic as far as like making dreams feel like nightmares. And it is a film that is very contextually like queer in a way, because like Rita and Betty are just, they're in love with each other and they really want to like be together. And like that's the entire point of like the Silencio scene towards the end, is like these people have done so many bad things in their lives, but like they want to like stick together, and they have to like cry it out in the remix, and it's sad. But I think at the end of the day, like what I took out of this film watching it for the first time was just like, wow, you can make films like these, and you can like really stretch out of like the box as far as just like making something that's like completely like out of like the 3-act structure. But also like it really changed me as like someone who like critiques films in a way, and just like really kind of like interprets themes and aesthetics and character motivations inside of films and outside of films with like the directors and creators. And just I think just film is just, it's memorizing. It's again a film that has stood under like scrutiny behind just like the critical reception when it came out. Like, yeah, a lot of people gave it a lot of love, but it's one of those films where when it came out, people were just like, oh yeah, like I don't understand this, like just regular people. But I think the kind of idea of like David Lynch as an artist has become deeper and deeper ever since he has passed. It's one of those things where I'm just like, wow, I'm glad like that he made this like type of film in his career, late in his career, and had the ability to have people around him who really respected his artistic choices. And yeah, like this is like one of the best films of like the 21st century. I keep on saying that, but it really is. And it's one of the most influential films because inside of like cinephile spaces, this is like the starter pack film that you recommend for a lot of people who really want to like understand like different types of cinema. I think this is the film you should recommend to people who really want to like start out watching like cinema that really fucks up with your mind. And I think Mulholland Drive is one of the scariest but also surprisingly very poetic films that you'll see in your lifetime. And I'm just really happy that like David Lynch just made this film. And Naomi Watts, I think, gives one of her best performances in her career, and like one of the best performances of like the 21st century. Like she does a lot of things where you're really trying to figure out what these characters are going through, and the audition scene in this film is just top fucking notch. But I can go on and on about this film. I want to know what you guys think about Mulholland Drive. I just love this film, and on like every single rewatch of this film, I get more out of it, and I think that's the entire point of this film, is to continue watching this film, continue critiquing it, interpreting it, really kind of putting different perspectives of like the different characters in this film, like Betty, Diane, Rita, Camilla, and just really understanding like what David Lynch had to go through to make this film, and like what this film speaks to for a younger generation and an older generation who grew up with this film. And yeah, man, like I'm so happy that this film exists in our cinema landscape. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I am wearing my David Lynch t-shirt that I got from the IFC Center when I actually watched Inland Empire for the first time in theaters. I'm actually glad I saw that film in theaters and not at home, because that was an experience, man. And maybe I should really talk about Inland Empire as a film maybe on my channel someday, but I think for now this film is just, it really needs to be kind of like highlighted. And I'm glad I wrote the article for Pop Topic, and you should be reading a lot of the articles on Pop Topic and like following my socials, commenting, subscribing, liking, sharing this video. Spread the word. We back up as far as movies go. And yeah, man, like thank you guys so much. I will be seeing you in the next video. Peace out.